Thank you very much, Pam, for the very nice introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. And first of all, thank you all for being here on this beautiful Saturday. I'll try to make as much sense as possible for you as a lay audience as to where we are with gallium-68 labeled peptides. What are the things that are blocking us in the United States from having it used routinely, and where do I think that we will move forward with this? So I'm going to skip quickly over this because George already gave the same slide, but I wanted to include it as well just to illustrate that if you look just like new cases each year, relatively small number. If you look at all the patients surviving with neuroendocrine tumors, that number is not that small. And I guess that's the reason why many of the awareness days are using the zebra symbol. And it goes back to what George said. Many physicians in the community think of many other diagnoses before thinking of a neuroendocrine tumors. So what is peptide receptor radionuclide imaging? It is a series of procedures where we attach to peptides radiopharmaceuticals, so substances that emit small amount of radiation for diagnostic purposes, and they target the same type of somatostatin receptors that George presented in his talk as being expressed in many of these neuroendocrine tumors. So these peptides are specifically targeted to identify sites where neuroendocrine tumors present, and they have little or no damage to normal tissue when they're used for therapy purposes. There's a variety of them that you may have heard of. DORA is a common name, and that's the chemical linker that attaches the radiopharmaceutical to the peptide, and you may have heard about DORA-TOC, DORA-NOC, DORA-TATE. It must not tell you much. I will tell you just that there's very similar variants of the same peptides attached to the same radiopharmaceutical. The reason why there are many of them is commercial patents and who developed what and what part of the world these patents are available. Unfortunately, in the United States, they're all three protected by patents, and because the market is small enough from an industry perspective and the cost associated with passing these through the FDA is very high, there's not one company that's interested in putting all the money in developing this into commercial products. But we as a community are not happy with this. It is maybe not as frustrating for you to hear that this gets done outside of US, but it's also frustrating for us to go to meetings in Europe and other parts of the world and know that our colleagues have been using these for decades, or at least a decade, and we're unable to use it. So there is a large effort that the National Society, the Society of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging, to make as many sites as possible available in the United States where these peptides imaging are available to patients like yourself. It's not easy because in academia we don't have the resources of the industry, but there are some sites that already proceeded with it. So why is it important? Well, it is important because if you can see in this example, an indium scan, indium octreottate, which is a standard of care reimbursed imaging study for patients with neuroendocrine tumors, may show findings that are suggestive of a tumor. However, the same patient imaged with a newer technology, with a DOTA peptide, demonstrates a significant number of lesions that otherwise may have not been known. This is not always the case. I'm not trying to say here that by using a DOTA peptide PET, you'll always be able to make an impact on the patient. Don't go home with that message. But there are patients who benefit from this, and probably more important than just that is the fact that this is a more convenient study for the patient. If you ever had an octreoscan, you know that you get injected on day one, and then you have to come back at 24 hours, 48 hours, sometimes even 72 hours. With this new PET study, you get injected now, images are taken 1 hour later, you go home and you don't have to come back. So clearly improved convenience for the patient. So I'm not going to talk too much about the benefits, but there are a few slides that I want to show you. One of them, a paper that compared one of these peptides PET with a standard of care study, and it showed that it detected more lesions than the standard of care. It also have been proven to be advantageous for the physicians in that they had better management tools on how to proceed with treatment or no treatment for the patients. Another study also compares these two modalities. And granted that this was done in Europe, so different financial environment than the United States, but they have shown that it's actually cheaper to do this newer study than the standard of care treatment. And it's cheaper if you take into account camera utilization, so since you don't have to come back 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours taking scanning time from the machine, that makes it a financially viable proposition. And also because there are fewer examinations, because you can find out the diagnosis in one exam as opposed to having to repeat it multiple times, it also made sense financially, as I said. There are also studies comparing this DOTA peptide PET with another standard of care PET scan called FDG. That one is sugar, glucose labeled with fluorine-18, a radiopharmaceutical. And depending on what type of neuroendocrine tumor you may have, whether it's more differentiated, as is this case in this study where the DOTA peptide worked better than the FDG, or less differentiated when the FDG would work better. So there are tools. They're mainly as research in this country, unfortunately, because of all the hurdles associated with passing them through all the regulatory bodies. Why did we decide to get involved? As I said, first, out of frustration, because our colleagues are able to offer this in other parts of the world, and we're unable to do it. So we think that since this is available elsewhere, we should do every effort to make it available to patients in the United States. And this is truly in line with the mission of the Stanford Hospital and Clinics and the School of Medicine, that is to advance medicine through research and innovation, to provide every possible cutting-edge technology, to be a leader locally and nationally, and to improve patient care and access to care. There's no academic gain for us from this. Everything that was to be published out of these studies has been done, as I said, for a decade. But it's good for the patient, and I think that it's worthwhile to be done. I hesitated before putting numbers in this talk because I'm not sure how much you want to hear about it. But in the end, I decided to include a few slides of what are the costs for us to produce this, and what may be in the end some of the costs associated with this exam for you as patients. These are the total number of octreoscan exams that we do at Stanford, and I'm not sure that all of them will be converted to gallium dotatate once we start doing this study. But we budgeted for about half of these patients getting scanned with a dotatate, and you will see how that will make an impact. So the next slide is, what are the financials? Why is it so difficult to start a program like that? It's not just regulatory hurdles to put together paperwork, send it to the FDA, get it approved, submit annual reports, et cetera, for something that we know that it's safe and we know that it works well because thousands of patients, maybe some of you already traveled to Europe or other parts of the world to have this study done. So we know that it works, but it's the bureaucracy of having to have it passed one more time through the regulatory bodies in the US. So I won't bother you with all the things that need to be done, but there are chemicals that need to be purchased, there are chemicals, there are synthesis modules, there are generators. So just to get started, you need $150,000. And then each year, you need consumables that are more than $50,000 to $60,000. The good news is that once you purchase this generator, you don't need to replace it every year. It will be there. The synthesis module will be there. You can use it for many, many years. So that's just a startup cost. The other good news is that this gallium generator, it's a fixed cost. It renews itself every few days. You can produce more gallium for about 9 to 12 months. So you can simply, the more patients you scan, the cheaper it will get because this is a one-time cost that you have to pay. But still, there's a high amount of numbers. In our application to the FDA to be allowed to recover some of these costs, because the hospital already invested in these upfront costs, but there are costs associated with the chemists who are going to produce it, we enrolled an independent CPA, so someone who's not affiliated with Stanford, to itemize all the costs associated with this. And the number that she came up with is, assuming we will scan 20 patients a year, it will be about $3,400 just to produce a radiopharmaceutical. If there are 40 patients, this cost will be reduced in half, will be $1,700, and so forth. So the more patients you scan, the cheaper it will get. But it's a cost that someone will have to be able to cover. Otherwise, we don't get the generator, we don't get any of the chemicals for free. And in fact, because of the patents that are still active in the United States, these chemicals are actually very, very expensive to purchase. The one good thing that we're able to do, where we went to the hospital and not only did they give us that amount up front to start this program, They also agreed that if a patient's insurance company will not pay for the technical fee for the PET-CT, so how much the cost of the exam itself is, the hospital will waive that cost. So the waive of the exam itself will be waived if the patient has to pay out of pocket. But unfortunately, we have no way to cover this cost of producing the radiopharmaceutical. So I wanted to show you how these things look like. They arrived at Stanford. This is the gallium generator as it was wrapped and packed and delivered to us. This was the synthesis module as it was delivered from Italy to us, a large box. We went through the process of installing it at the generator before having all the lines attached to it and all the generator and everything else. It's a complicated process, but once you get it started and running, it becomes routine. And I really hope that soon we'll be able to have it as a routine procedure. It doesn't help that the government is shut down, and I don't want to turn this political, but our application is stuck with the FDA, and nobody knows where it is right now. So unfortunately, I cannot tell you that you can come to us and get scanned yet. But I hope that by the end of the year, you will be able to come to Stanford and get scanned using this new modality. So a few thoughts from my perspective. Molecular imaging has been thought of as something very research, but I think that it really has to become a part of patient management, not just something that's fancy, but if you are to personalize medicine, I think that having tools to actually do it in terms of diagnostics is something that's very important. There's also a mismatch between all the regulatory hurdles and what needs to be brought to patient. And all these hurdles only increase the cost of bringing something new to patient care. And I'm sure that throughout the day, this will be revealed. And if you like British humor, I suggest that you read this paper published in the British Medical Journal. Clearly, some people there was frustrated as we are with all the regulatory things related to trials. And you know, nobody tested parachutes as a way to save lives, but we're all convinced that they do just that. So I would like to read this to you, that they suggest that everyone might benefit if the most radical supporters of evidence-based medicine organized and participated in a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled crossover trial of the parachute. So I'm not arguing against clinical trials, but I think that sometimes they're really not what's needed for patient care. Before I end, I would like to bring to your attention the fact that the Society of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging has a website designed for patients. It's based on input not just from physicians, but also from a patient advisory advocacy board that actually Josh is the chair of. You can find information about scans, about therapies for cancer, for heart disease, for brain disorders. There's also a card or a poster that you can download and take to your patient, to your physician, and ask them what can we do for you in nuclear medicine, in molecular imaging, and we'll be happy to answer. There's a lot of effort at Stanford to raise funds to cure cancer, and I'm happy to say that we participated in nuclear medicine, and that's me crossing the finish line last weekend for the Canary Challenge, an event that raised more than $900,000 for the Stanford Cancer Institute. And with that, I would like to thank you for listening to me, and thank you for being here today.